what must I say? It is a worldwide organization. I think they have about 25,000 members internationally. In Holland, we have 370 members. It is established in 1875 by Blavatsky and Olcott, and in New York. Then they sailed to India, established the headquarters over there, and then it started growing all over the world. And I would like to cite Mrs. Blavatsky on what Theosophy is, if you don't mind. I think the way she says it is so to the point. I'd like to share that with you. She says, Theosophy is a shoreless ocean of universal truth, love and wisdom, reflecting its radiance on the earth, while the Philosophical Society is only a visible bubble on that reflection. Theosophy is divine nature, visible and invisible, and its society, human nature, trying to ascend to its divine parent. Theosophy, finally, is a fixed eternal sun, and the society, the evanescent comet, trying to settle in an orbit to become a planet, ever evolving within the attraction of the Sun of Truth. It was formed to assist in showing to men that such a thing as Theosophy exists, and to help them to ascend towards it by studying and assimilating its eternal verities. Now, what is clear here, that truth is a very important aspect of Theosophy. And you probably know that Theosophy has a motto: there is no religion higher than truth. And then in Sanskrit, it is truth is called Dharma, and we will speak also about Dharma later in this interview. One very interesting and important term of the whole theosophical terminology. So it means, it comes from the word Teosofía, which is Greek for the divine wisdom. And what Blavatsky wanted to do was to give back to humanity the origin of all wisdom. She says that we live in a world of fragmentation, and but in the beginning, many millions of years ago, humanity was still one, and the truth was one, and the truth was understood by humanity. But during the course of the millions of years and centuries, humanity got fragmented, and so did the truth, and different religions appeared, but they all stem from the same white light. It's as if you drop light through a prism, and it first, in the first place, it then spreads out like 7 colors, which you know from physics, I suppose, that experiment. And to study these religions is the second purpose of Theosophy. There are 3. First, to form a nucleus of brotherhood. Second, to study the different religions of mankind and science and philosophy. And the third, to study the unknown laws of nature and of man. So we would also call that the occult, that which is hidden. Theosophy also seeks the hidden laws, the occult laws within ourselves. Those are also the laws of transformation or yoga and also the occult laws in nature, which go beyond what men of science know about physics. Their knowledge is derived from the senses and the mind, whereas the hidden knowledge, third object of the society, is derived from higher senses and from intuition and clairvoyance and so on. Another important thing which Blavatsky introduced to the Western world was the notion of karma, reincarnation and karma. The Western world, being mainly Christian, didn't have these ideas in the Christian religion, and she found it important to introduce that to the Western mind, and it was received very well by the public. And now the word of karma is even in the normal dictionaries in the Western languages, and people understand, and it's part of their philosophy of life. And so many other things from Eastern philosophy she introduced to the West, and which was eagerly absorbed by the intellectuals of her day. And as such, it has triggered also a great interest in Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga, and so on, as we have seen in the 20th century, which culminated to the whole New Age movement and so on, and became a new stream into the Western culture. So that's what I can say briefly about Theosophical Society. But what does it mean for me? I'm a seeker. So what I'm seeking for, you could call self-realization, spiritual development, and so on. And I have found that Theosophy is the most helpful of all the systems there are in that quest which I am on. And I am a member of a society because I like to meet others who are also on that quest, so we can share ideas and we can share experiences, and we can also help promote Theosophy, which we value so high and of which we think people can benefit, promote that in the world. The founders of the Theosophical Society in 1875 in New York, but I'll start with HPB, which is her initials. She was called Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was born in Ukraine, which was then part of Russia. She belonged to the Russian nobility, and as a child she already had interesting experiences, and she read a lot in the library of her grandfather, a lot of philosophical and occult novels and scientific works. And then when she was very young, she started traveling. First she traveled to Greece and Egypt, and she met all kinds of interesting people. And then she also went to Paris and London, and then she went to New York. She had what we call a master, so a teacher who specially had her as a pupil. You know, the teachers in occultism, they don't have large classes, but they choose with a certain insight they choose their pupils, and she was one of them. And her master asked her to go to New York in 1874. And she went there, and that is where she met another person called Colonel Olcott. He was an American, and he had been active in the Civil War in the United States, but not in the war itself in the southern states, but he remained in New York and Washington doing administrative work. He was a lawyer, and also he was he had studied the science of agriculture, so he was quite a versatile person and a journalist. And he met Blavatsky when he was in the north of New York. There was a farm, the Eddy farm, where the two daughters were very involved in spiritualism. You know, people in those days had seances. They would sit around the table and then converse with the dead. But we can't do that, of course, so we need people who were especially gifted to do that. And these two sisters were. So all of New York and all the newspapers were interested and went to see that farm where all this took place. And that's where Olcott and Blavatsky met. But then Blavatsky started telling Olcott, actually my mission is much broader than just this seances of spiritualism, but I want to introduce to the West the wisdom of the East, the ancient divine wisdom. They settled in New York and in a 2-room apartment, and there she started writing. She wrote her first book, Isis Unveiled. It appeared in 1877 and was immediately a bestseller. But she was not such an organized mind. She was writing all day, and she was very inspired and had a lot of imagination and a lot of knowledge. But the man who was down to earth and who could organize things, that was Olcott. And they gathered a lot of people from New York, 14 or 17 the group was. And they came together in the apartments many times, and then they decided to organize it and make a society. And one of them came with the idea to call it the Theosophical Society. Theosophy was a term which was known not so very well, but a German philosopher of the 16th century, Jacob Boehme, used it, and also in Alexandria around 300 BC and 380, that period in the Mediterranean, an Egyptian town, when the Egyptians were ruled by Greek monarchs, the Ptolemies, and there it was also an established name. So that found that a good name, and then it went on, and people joined the society, became members. Also people in Europe got word of it and established their branches in Paris and London, also in Amsterdam. But then at a certain point they decided to move to India, Olcott and Blavatsky. And they first arrived in Ceylon, and then they went to India and toured India there, at the headquarters at Bombay, but then later on they established the headquarters in Ajay, which was south of, what was the name? the Portuguese name of that city in those days. Now it's called Chennai, Madras. It was originally Madras. Okay. So those were the two founders and the two presidents, as it were. She was president spiritually, and he was president an organization. As a young child already, Helena Blavatsky had a master. His name was Moria. He lived in either in Tibet or in India. He journeyed between the two places, but he visited her astrally. For those masters, it's not difficult they also can use the astral body, not only the physical body to travel, but also the astral body. And she met him in the flesh in London when she was 18. And he said, would you like to work for us, for humanity? We have interested, and so they asked her. They didn't say, you have to. They didn't make any use of their power or whatever. They let her free, and it had to be her choice. So she said, okay, I will do that, because she was a very gifted person, and there weren't much of those in the Western world, and that's how it started. So when Olcott and Blavatsky lived in New York, the master visited them a few times. So Olcott also got to know them, because there were actually two masters. Moria, Master M, was a master of Blavatsky, but he was assisted by Master K.H. Kuthumi, as someone who spoke the European languages very well. And they asked Olcott and Blavatsky to go to India to continue the work. In India, the masters already had a contact with two Englishmen living there, David Hume and Percy Sinnett. Hume was someone from the government, the English government, because India was an English colony and part of the British Empire, and Percy Sinnett was the editor of a British language newspaper, The Pioneer. And the masters corresponded with Percy Sinnett mainly. Also some letters to Hume, but mainly with Percy Sinnett, Alfred Percy Sinnett. And those letters were not for publication. And Alfred Percy Sinnett could ask questions and they would give answers and so on. So Sinnett was learning a lot about Theosophy. He later on published 2 books from the stuff he learned through the letters, and but still it was all private correspondence. Much later on, I think it was 1925, they were published by Mr. Trevor Barker, who had inherited the whole mass of letters. And Theosophists study them. They are very interesting, and they give a lot of inside information. So besides the books of Blavatsky, Isis Unveiled, and later on she wrote the more famous Seeker Doctrine, Theosophists also like to study the letters of the masters. Can I show you, if I can find it somewhere here? Mm-hmm. No, I don't have it here. I have an English one. Okay. No, they are sold. I'm sorry, we don't have one right now, but it's quite a large volume, and but beside of that, already during Blavatsky's life, because she died in 1891, other members of the society were writing, mainly in journals, but also books. And in the first decades, many books appeared, among others by Annie Besant, of which I have a book here, and Charles Leadbeater, and later on Mr. Hodgson, for instance, Geoffrey Hodgson, and later on also American authors came. So much is published in America by Quest publishers, and in Ajar, India, by the Theosophical Publishing House. And we have our small publisher in Amsterdam for the Dutch language. You know that in the 19th century, there was a new science, evolution. And Darwin played a great part in that. And that is when people started looking at a human being differently than before. Before that, the church was actually defining what a human being was. He was a crown of creation, and the most important creature, although they didn't use that word, entity, the most important of the solar system, which they also didn't, actually, Theosophical Society saw it as her purpose to elaborate on that new idea about evolution. And already the Western science had said humans come after animals. We are looking for the missing link, because the ancestors of humans must have been apes, gorillas and chimpanzees and so on, because they thought of evolution by only looking at the physical side and not the mental, not the soul, and not the spirit, just the physical side. And that's how they studied animals and plants and everything in nature in the viewpoint of evolution. Now, Theosophy is more Platonic, that is, spirit is also involved, not just matter. Actually, spirit is more important in the origin of everything. Also, that which is material is in the spirit. And so Theosophists say a human being is the link between spirit and matter, a most important link, because that plays a part in the whole cosmos. Spirit and matter are two extremities in the whole of creation, and they are linked by the mind of the human being. Well, this is very difficult to understand because it is so different from the way people in the West think. But it's an important and interesting definition. The human being is a link between spirit and matter. And that link is our mind. And the mind is the most important part of human beings, and through which they understand and can direct their lives and purposes and influence their surroundings. And yes, your next question, what is karma, is also logically followed. Karma is a word and also an idea which is completely alien to Western mind. There was no term in Western language equivalent to the Sanskrit word karma. In ancient Greece, they spoke of Nemesis, which is also a goddess. And that is what the closest you can get to karma in Western language, but it's an ancient, a dead language. It's not the same as modern Greek. So Blavatsky introduced that, and it is linked with the idea of reincarnation when it comes to karma in man. But first of all, it means the law of cause and effect. Everything has a cause. And so there is always a connection between the thing as it is and what caused it. In other words, also why it became what it became. And in moral sense, it means that you reap what you sow. It's a word you can find in the Bible, but the idea of karma you don't find explained there. But you reap what you sow. So it is a moral law when it comes to karma in humanity, because in nature it is a natural law, karma. And science works with it. Science works with, well, if I, for instance, raise the temperature to 100 degrees of water, it evaporates, becomes a gas. When I bring it down to 0 degrees Celsius, it becomes solid. It was fluid, but it becomes solid because it turns into ice. So here, this is also a causal reasoning, causal relation. So the whole world is full of that. It works like that, you could say. But the new thing for the Western mind was that they finally understood the words of the Bible, you reap what you sow, which you can understand when it's one lifetime. If you do something bad, they will get you and punish you. You know, if you do something good, you will have the fruits of that. If you work very hard, you will have some money or lots of money. So you can use this law to your own benefit or to your own downfall. But the new thing was, of course, karma in relation to reincarnation. So why is our life like this? Why does the one have a miserable life? And why does the other have a comfortable life, health and wealth? And the other is poor and sickly and so on. And that is because he reaps what his deeds were in a former life. So Dharma is usually translated with 3 words or 4. Law, duty, religion, And one can also say the foundation on which the totality of creation and the universal laws rest. So it is a very large, all-encompassing idea, Dharma. It also means the essential nature of a being. I was in my house and I heard a bird scream in anguish. So I looked out the window and I saw this beautiful falcon, in his claw a little sparrow. And I immediately realized, although you might feel sorry for the sparrow and think, what an awful bird of prey doing such an awful thing, but the bird was so beautiful that I immediately also understood it is his Dharma. He has to do that because that is his nature. You know what I mean? So everything has a purpose in life and in nature. It is what it is, and that is Dharma. So it is our duty to become what we are in essence. That's actually what we pursue all our life. Most people don't take any notice of it, or they are distracted by all the things in life which are sort of teasing them and asking their interest and leading them astray from what is the main and the only real purpose of life. And the only real purpose of life is to realize your Dharma. So your inner nature, to become what you are, to become what you are supposed to be. And that finds its expression in right ethics and the natural good. A person who fulfills his Dharma is someone who is observed by others to be good and true, morally high standards, and just and fair. That comes naturally when you develop your Dharma. Besant, who wrote this book, I can recommend anyone, since it is such a difficult subject, more difficult to understand what Dharma is than to understand what karma is. I recommend anyone who wants to get into this subject to read this little book of Annie Besant. She has 4 meanings, like I said, duty, law, and religion, and she adds righteousness. That's what I can say about it. I got to know esoterics, Theosophy and all other systems, astrology and so on, when I was about 20, so that's 55 years ago. And I didn't join the Theosophical Society then. I did much later, so I was already well versed in Theosophy before I joined the society. But of course, what it meant to be was, to me, the most important thing was reincarnation and karma and the Eastern philosophy. I came into contact with the Eastern philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tse, Chinese philosophy, when I was 20. And it appealed very much to me because I was only introduced to the Western philosophy and Western culture during my youth. And then I started studying that, reading about it, and incorporating the idea of karma and reincarnation into my own life. I could understand my own biography better, the things I had to go through. I could understand that those were karma, and to find a way to live. When I read the Bhagavad Gita, I understood how I should conduct my life, how I should relate to my daily work and to the things that happened to me, good and bad. I could all learn that from this one classical book, Bhagavad Gita. So that was very important to me. And after many years of studying both Western and Eastern systems, I decided actually Theosophy fits me the most. You know, because I used to have my own philosophy when I was not yet 20. And then later on, when I read Theosophy, I thought, hey, this is just the way I think about it. So it was, you might say, it was also my Dharma. It was the essential me, which I recognized in the teachings of Theosophy. So there was no discrepancy between myself and the teachings of Theosophy. It was all natural. So, you know, with the church before that and with other philosophies, I always had to have discussion because I didn't agree with certain things or I opposed certain things. And with Theosophy, it was actually, I felt completely at ease. So that's what makes me think, yes, I am a Theosophist, if anything. And it influences my life, that it's actually with me every day. Sometimes I say it's a compass, and you know what a compass is. So you watch the compass to see what the direction is you have to take. It's an inspiration. It's a consolation. When you're down and depressed, it can give you comfort. And it's inspiration for your mind. It quickens your mind. It makes you feel enlightened. So that is what it means to me. Yes. We have a proverb in Holland, but it's in all languages. If you want to make the world a better place, start with yourself. So, and Theosophy also very much emphasizes the necessity that we work on ourselves. We have to train our mind and our emotions. That's what we have to get hold on. And we have to have high standards regarding our thoughts and our actions. We have to do the right thing. And especially, we have to be unselfish. Selfishness is no way to go when you're a Theosophist. We have to be unselfish, and we have to always be willing to serve our fellow men and the society. And if you live this way, you influence all the people you come into contact with. So you sort of mix your own color with the general color of millions of people. So that is a kind of an invisible feature, an invisible way of making the world better. If all the individuals in the world become better, then automatically the world will become better. That's important. People tend to forget that and think, we can make it a better place if we do this and do that, all kind of great plans, which cost millions of dollars, what governments do. It's very much on the outside, and it's usually big. But we say it's the small, which is on the inside, is more important. And community service, when Annie Besant became president in 1907, she established the Theosophical Order of Service. And that was especially meant not as the Theosophical Societies to study in the first place, but to help humanity, especially in those countries where the large masses were still poor, had no education, had no decent place to live. They lived in ghettos, and they didn't have medical care and so on. In those countries, especially, the TOS is very important, of course. And everywhere you can imagine that Theosophists can help in all the social work which is necessary. In America, for instance, they do a lot of work with prisoners, I know. And also in Western cultures, we do collect money, for instance, for women in India, and education of women and education of the poor in India and in other poor countries, medical care, and so on. So that does happen for the community. It's an obligation. When you're a Theosophist, you do not live only for yourself. You care about the world, and you see it as your duty to help the world in what it needs. And may I already say 10 and 11, what is God and what is the truth? Because these three questions are similar in that way that actually words can't express that. I can give you some kind of scientific answer about what is love, but you will say, that's not helping me. What is love is you must experience. And what is God? It's best to experience it. You can ask the priest, the church, what is God, and he can give you an answer from the teachings. But does it really help you to understand? Or is it actually what you want to understand is something inside, something mystical, something pure, something about the essence of life, something which comforts you? And the same is truth. Truth is no doubt that 2 and 2 is 4. That's true. 2 and 2 is 5. No, it's not true. And truth is what the judge wants to hear from the perpetrator when he has to confess to a crime. But all these things are relative, and what they really are, with a capital letter, love, God, and truth, that is what your soul can know. Not so much as what your mind can know, but your heart and your soul can know what these are. And if you live by them, then you are fulfilling your Dharma, because you are fulfilling the purpose of why you are here.